Welcome to my workshop. You are watching Casual DIY channel, and in today's video I do have a very interesting product for you to check out. It's a coping sled for a router. Now it comes from Banggood and it's made by ENJOYWOOD. Okay. However, this is a little bit different and a little bit more special, as the company, the ENJOYWOOD, actually made this tool with collaboration with a fantastic YouTuber, Dennis, from Hooked on Wood. I'm pretty certain you know him already, but if you don't, I'm going to leave a link to his channel down below in the description of this video. So I do have high hopes for this product. Let's have a look what's in the box. As you can see, the box is quite large and everything seems to be really nicely and neatly packaged here. So let's take out all the components. That's your clamps. And that's the sled itself. That's the main plate of our tool, and I have to say it's actually very heavy. The plate itself, it's all cast aluminium at the thickness of 9mm. So this is really thick and heavy duty, I have to say. How about the size of this sled? Well, let's have a look. Side to side, we've got 39.5 centimeters. Front to back, 20 centimeters. Now it does have these really nice ergonomic handles to it, so that's quite cool. And the markings are really nice and easy to read. As you can see, you do have some pins indicating that you can use many different angles as well with this jig, which is really cool. As you can see here, you've got the ENJOYWOOD, which is the maker of this. However, Hooked on Wood does have its logo on it as well. On the reverse side of this sled, you do have a aluminium guide just over here, and it does have multiple screw holes, so you can put it in many places on the sled itself to accommodate the location of your T-track or your slot. This will help you in aligning the sled itself with the router bit and the T-track you have. However, it will not fit all T-tracks, okay? Mine is really small, and as you know, this is my DIY version of a router table. Now the bar itself, it's 19mm wide, so you need to have a slot that's 19mm to accommodate for that. And of course, if that will not be fitting your T-track, like in my case, I can always make my version of that in, for example, plywood or anything else to fit my T-track, and that's what I will do in the future. Also, you do have some plastic runners on this, so it will glide hopefully a lot easier on your tabletop. In total, we do have 3 set positions for this bar. As you can see from the top, it's a lot easier. We are in the furthest position, middle, and the closest position to the router bit, to the edge over here. And more or less to give you an indication of the distances, more or less to the middle. So from the edge, we've got 15.3mm, 13.3mm, and that's 11 point, probably about 3mm as well. So that's your main setups that you can use for that bar. On the top of the plate, we also do have those 4 pins, okay? So they are screwed onto from underneath, and you can actually move the location to different holes and different positions. Now the 4 you can see here are responsible for 90 degrees, so you can put your piece of timber against them, and you can be assured that that's going to be 90 degrees to the edge of the plate itself. You can also put your pieces of timber on the 45-degree angle, and that gives you a little bit more scope for your potential project. So you're not only limited to 90 degrees cuts, but also you can do 45 as well, just like so. However, again, you can change the location of these with the holes that are provided on this sled, depending on your needs. In my case, I'm actually not going to be able to use that bar in my current setup, So quite easily, I'm just going to remove it. And I'm going to remove the hardware with the keys that are already provided in this kit. And as you can see on this bar, you also do have additional ability to actually fit this even better to your slot. As you do it up, it will expand this plastic ring to make sure you get a perfect fit. And you do get another set of these if, for example, they got damaged. Now you may ask yourself a question, well, how do you use that if that bar is not installed on the base? Well, what you do get is this acrylic guide that will be riding against the fence of your router table. It's actually quite thick, so it's not that flexible, and that's exactly what we want. And the way you install it, well, you've got 2 pins on either side of this plate, so we just need to undo the pins. Locate the plate on top and screw it down. And I think this way of using the sled is far better, far more accurate, as for example, if you're using a T-slot and that metal bar, that could not be fully aligned to your router bit, whereas the fence, if it's slightly out of alignment, it doesn't really matter. That will be always in the center of it. Okay, to make sure your workpiece is in the correct position and it's not going to move on you, what you do get a pair of clamps like these. They're quite neatly designed and seem to be very good quality as well. Now the bar itself is actually very heavy, so that is not aluminium, that is metal. Now it's a shame that the dimensions of this bar, it's not 20 millimeters, as then you could potentially use it on your MFT table. However, let's have a look at the diameter of this. Yeah, that's only 16 millimeters. If your dog holes are 16 millimeters, well, you do get an extra pair of dog hole clamps as well. But in my case, my dog holes are 20 millimeters, so no good for me really. So let's install the clamps, put the bar through here, lock it in place for now. You do get a bolt to install it, and you can put it in any of those holes you want to make sure it's in the right place for you. Now the advantage of this type of clamping is, well, you can put it in any of the holes, and also it spins around 360 degrees, so you can really place it wherever you need it, and then the position could be locked at the back, and that's your clamping jaw just over here. Now as I mentioned, these pins can be moved. So for example, if you've got a narrow piece like this, it doesn't matter, you can use the base setup. However, if you've got a really wide board, what you can do is to move those 2 pins right to the edge just over here, and then between those 2 holes you've got potentially a width of 23 centimeters. So a board that's 23 centimeters wide could be used with that as well. So primarily this is the way I'm going to be using this jig with the acrylic guide installed. However, if you do want to use, for example, your T-tracks, you may come to a situation where your T-track is actually too far away from the router bit itself when using this sled. And in that scenario, this jig actually does come with a cool feature. So what you don't want to have is the workpiece to be really far away and have that gap, the overhang being very large. You definitely want to avoid that. So what they come up with, on the front of the machine, you do have this lip onto which you can install a board, okay? And in the set, you actually do get 2 pieces of hardboard, just like so. However, you can quite easily make your own. So you can install that with the screws provided, just like so, okay? And then what you do, using the T-track with the bar, you run it across the bit that you want to use, and that bit will cut off any excess of that board. And then you've got a perfect match for the jig itself, that edge there, to the router bit that you're going to be using, and then you are limiting the overhang. Okay, you do have support from that hardboard underneath. However, that's going to work in a certain scenario, and what I mean by that, well, that board there will be paired with a router bit that you just use. Unless you don't want to have a super flush finish to it, that's not a problem. You know, if you're missing few centimeters or few millimeters, that's still better than nothing. But if you want to have a flush distance between the router bit and that plate, well, and you do change that bit, you just need to install a new plate, and you can then write down what router bit you've used for a specific plate if you're using several of them at a time. So that's enough of me presenting you this plate. Let's actually see how well or how easy it is to operate this. Okay, so let me just show you a couple of cuts you can do with this jig, but obviously you know what a coping sled can do. I'm just going to show you the quick operation. My router bit is just a straight bit, and we're going to create a tenon on this piece of timber, that's pine. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my leading edge that's going to be riding against that fence. I'm going to put that against it, and it just goes like so. Now, thanks to the stopping pins, that piece there will be nice and secure, and it's not going to be spinning around on your jig. So for example, let's set everything up. So I'm putting that edge against my fence. Now I can put that piece against the fence as well, okay, against those two pins, as I do want to have a straight cut. And now I'm going to lock it down in place with this handy little clamp. Lower it down just like so, lock it in place, and tell you what, that is not going anywhere, only with one clamp. There we go, that's done. But as you can see, we got a bit of tear out on that, and a bit of cleanup to do. Okay, so we do have a very shallow tenon. The way to increase the length of that tenon, we just need to move the fence away a little bit. Okay, so that's how it works. You don't really adjust the jig itself in that case, just the fence. But also you definitely want to deal with the problem of the tear up. So let's do the same cut with another piece, and actually a sacrificial board that will go first, and then our main board that will have the tenon. That's the best way to get rid of any potential tear out, and will make the tenon a little bit longer as well as we add it. So one clamp will be holding the sacrificial part, the sacrificial piece just over here. Let's set up everything up so the jig goes against the fence, sacrificial piece goes against the fence. So now we can lock this down, and now we're going to be using the second clamp to actually clamp down our main workpiece. Just like so, everything's nice and stable, and let's do it again. Okay, let's check the results, and as you can see, we've got no tear out on this piece at all, just a bit from my router bit at the top. That's easy, sand it down so we can have nice and crisp edges. And now what we can do is to actually shift our fence just a little bit back to create a longer tenon. Again, butting against our fence, placing our workpiece, locking it down, and off we go. And there we go, our tenon is much longer now. Okay, and that's how we would do in this case to get longer tenons. For example, if you're doing a cabinet door or anything like that, that's how you would get your tenon. Obviously, this is just an example, so the tenon is not bob-on in the middle, as I wasn't really referencing the router bit of the material. It's just to show you more or less how everything works with this jig. And the sacrificial piece did its job, as you can see. The router bit went into that to make sure there's no blowout at the end of our workpiece. Now, what you can actually do as well, for example, if you're building doors or frames or anything like that, and you do have 45-degree angle, instead of just having a mitered angle, you can do half lap joints on that, or tenon and groove as well, depending on what router bits you have. So I'll tell you what, let's have a look how the cut will look like on the 45-degree angle on this mitered edge. And again, you may want to consider adding some sort of a sacrificial piece at the back to make sure you've got a nice and clean cut. So let's offer this up to our fence, then our two pieces in the right position on those positive stops there. And as you can see, we've got a perfect half lap going. Okay, you're going to be increasing the height of your router bit until you get the correct size of your half lap for the second part, for example, of your frame. Or have this as a tenon joint. Do the same thing on the other side, and that will be your tenon part. As you can see, this is quite a fairly flexible jig over here, guys, that will allow you to use it in different types of setups to actually accommodate the jig itself to your particular needs. So this is quite decent. The quality of everything is absolutely fine. There's no issues with that. I actually really do like the clamping system. The clamps themselves are really well made and easy to use. However, on some occasions when you do have a sacrificial piece behind it, it may be quite awkward to catch both the sacrificial piece and the workpiece together, especially if they're not the same thickness. Then you would have to use two clamps, and it could get a little bit tricky to clamp them down together. But in most cases, you will actually be using a sacrificial piece that's the same thickness as your work material, so the clamping shouldn't be an issue. Now let's try to use it on a bit of a wider board and with a different router bit. Right, so now I've installed this pattern bit with a bearing on top of it, so I'm gonna just make sure that my fence is aligned with the bearing itself. Just gonna use a straight edge to do that. And now we can use our jig, our sled, quite safely with a narrow piece like that to get that profile on the edge just over here. It's always a lot harder to get that done on a narrow piece. If it's a long piece, there's no issues. We just ride it along the fence. However, with a narrower piece like this, you know, there's a lot of potential for movement. Hence, the sled like this is absolutely perfect for the job. So let's marry that up to our fence. I'm gonna drop the clamp down. We can use the second clamp as well. Everything's nice and stable. And now we can transfer the pattern from our router bit to our piece of timber. And there you go, the pattern has been transferred onto our piece of timber safely and easily. And of course, this type of sled is absolutely perfect in conjunction with the tenon and groove bits, just like these, when you're creating your shaker style doors, cabinets, anything like that. Absolutely perfect as well. But I think you get the general purpose and how to use this. In a way, quite simple jig, but it's very effective. However, doesn't mean it's flawless, okay? There's few things that I would like to be done better or actually added to the whole thing. First of all, the plate, the acrylic plate itself, it's actually very limiting, and in a way you only got one setup there. I wish there was another size, a larger size, that potentially maybe you can move forward and back to accommodate the exact size you want, as at the minute you are only limited to about 4 centimeters. So from that edge of our plate to the edge of our acrylic, you only got about 4 centimeters of play. So that is not a lot in some cases. So if they added another acrylic piece that would be longer, I think in that case would be more beneficial. Next thing, the clamps themselves. They're actually quite good and they do make sure that your workpiece stays in place. However, if you want to add the sacrificial part, then sometimes clamping both of the pieces could be a little bit problematic. So for example, some sort of a clamping bar that would go across would potentially be a little bit better. A good point of this jig is the simplicity of it and a lot of already pre-drilled holes for, well, additional hardware that you can make yourself to fit your needs. And this is what I like about this the most. I can actually add things to it to suit my particular situation, and in most cases you don't get that ability, and with this one you do. And the price of this, well, it comes to around $110, so it's actually not that bad when you consider that you do get very high quality piece of equipment over here, guys. And I have to say, this jig could be quite flexible and quite handy in many scenarios, even on a table saw. That top plate here can ride along any fence, so you can clamp down your workpiece, use that acrylic top as a guide on your fence and use it for different types of jobs. Now, if you're in the market of actually buying a sled like this, I'm going to leave a link to this one down below in the description. However, there are plenty of other options out there already, so check them out as well. Have a look which one fits your needs most. For me, this is actually quite solid and quite a good option to have in your workshop. Just a word of disclaimer, this has been sent to me by Banggood themselves free of charge. They didn't pay for this video, or they didn't ask me to make one, or actually say any nice things about this kit. So whatever you find in my video, these are my opinions. If I'm gonna find anything else wrong with it, I will let you know in a follow-up video. And you're definitely gonna see me using this kit for some future projects. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this, or maybe you have some questions or you want me to use this in a particular situation, you know where the comment section is. Drop me a question, ask me to use it in the way you want to see it. But for now, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. But before you go, I do have some really cool playlists over here. Click on those and maybe you'll find your next video to watch. For today, that's all. Thank you very much. Take care.